Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Unfamiliar Territory. I'm joined by my co-host, Kalikais.
Welcome, everyone.
And today we have a special guest on our podcast, Bllodpet.
Hello, everyone. I'm so glad to be here.
So you may know him for playing Familiars back in the day before Mystic Sanctuary. So we're going to talk about how he played Familiars back then and what it's like compared now to the days of Mystic Sanctuary. So, Bllodpet, let's talk a little bit about yourself, how you got into Familiars and Pauper and all that jazz.
Absolutely. So yeah, my name is Bllodpet. I often misspell it. I just like the name. It brings me back to the times when I started Magic, the early 2000s. I was very casual back then. Just later I started to be, I don't want to say competitive, but I take my hobbies seriously, let's say. So it was around 2014 where I wanted to get into Magic seriously. First, I was trying to get into Legacy, as I really like the being able to play with the old cards. But the cost of Legacy was very prohibitive, as were the different decks. So instead I shifted into Pauper, and that's what I've been focusing mostly since. I believe Familiars I started around 2018, heavily inspired by the almighty 420 Dragon. And later, when 420 Dragon kind of ceased his content creation, I started creating Pauper content myself, focused on Familiars.
Yeah, when I started getting into Familiars, I got beat in the leagues by 420 Dragon, and then I started looking for content and started watching all your stuff and just consuming everything I possibly could, and then probably pinging you incessantly on Magic Online asking questions.
Yeah, and that's great. Like, that's why we do it, right? It's not some fame. I mean, the Pauper community is fairly small, even the online one, but it's great people, and Familiars is definitely a great deck worth talking about.
So when you were playing Familiars, were you trying to focus on like getting good at the challenges or just like doing leagues and playing competitively?
I actually haven't done many challenges because the times didn't fit me well, but I've done probably hundreds of leagues, and by playing leagues on Magic Online, I grew my Pauper collection, selling the treasure chests for tickets and buying basically all the different Pauper decks, even some vintage decks. I tried to do that in paper as well, minus the vintage deck, of course.
Have you been playing any other, were you playing any of the other Pauper decks or just like focusing on Familiars and dabbling?
Oh yeah, I mean, as I said, I have all the decks, or had, and I mean, it wouldn't be difficult to update it to what the decks are nowadays. And I tried to play like all the serious and even a lot of the janky Pauper decks as well, but Familiars are definitely what got me interested the most and what I've been focusing.
So would you say that you're mostly a combo player, like at heart?
Oh yes, definitely. Definitely blue player, definitely combo player. I used to play a bit of, actually quite a bit of tribe decks before I started Familiars. But Familiars was like a step up from the tribe decks in terms of like deck complexity and difficulty. And I believe like once you or once anyone masters Familiars, you can play anything.
Yeah, I like to say that there's 1,000 decisions trees, and I feel like there was at least one match that I lost because I played the wrong land turn one.
Oh yeah. That is, I definitely didn't mean to say that I've mastered it truly. And like getting back into the deck nowadays really showed me that I still have things to improve on and catch up on.
I like to dabble a lot in other decks as well, but there's something about Familiars that just somehow gets me back into the deck.
Oh yeah, and I mean, for me with Familiars, it seemed to me like a real shame that not that many people were interested in the deck, or not that many were playing it. Really, like if we go back a lot in time, until somewhere around 2016, familiars, actually as per familiars, were like the most popular pauper alpha deck, winning all the games. It had to get nerfed severely, banning all kinds of cards, including Cloud of Fairies. And after that, the deck has been kind of hasn't seen much play, except for when 420 Dragon revived it. And once he stopped playing, or stopped playing as much, I kind of picked it up there and starting my own content. And I'm really glad that you guys picked up the virtual torch of familiar gameplay, at least on Magic Online and YouTube community, and even made a great Discord. And yeah, I'm so glad to see that.
Yeah, it's funny that we kind of like pass the virtual torch. It's like maybe somebody will always pop up to like carry it on. It seems like nowadays, because the original Cloud of Fairies deck was just kind of like a 1-2 kill you, and this one is you have to play through all of the different lines, and you have like a long loop that you have to run that kind of puts people off.
Oh yes, definitely. I think it's much different deck than it used to be back in 2016 with Cloud of Fairies. And even now the deck is much different and playing much different based on the current metagame than what it used to be like a year ago, which is when I sort of stopped playing as actively.
Yeah, I think the Cloud of Fairies version really allowed for sloppy play, because you can make a punt, but it wasn't as heavily punished. But now you have like all these lines they can take, and you have to think about the correct one to make, or else they can cost you the match. So I can see why that kind of turns people off the deck lately.
Oh yeah, it's definitely a difficult deck, and I think it almost like needs content creators and people to talk about the deck and educate everyone, because it's very scary to pick it up for the first time.
Oh, absolutely.
So I made the podcast is so I can help out those players that want to learn the deck but don't want to take years to completely master it.
Oh yeah, definitely. Thanks to content like yours, I'm sure people can get into it in no time.
We wanted to see if we could talk about some of your older lists, and like how that might compare to right now, and like why you made those decisions.
But yeah, so as you can see, maybe let's start with the mana base. It's very greedy, to say the least. 21 lands, sometimes we played up to 22, but usually 21 with 6 bounce lands, which is crazy, right? Like if you compare it to the 1, 2, maybe 3 what you play nowadays, 6 is definitely a lot. But it's the way we used to play it. I think all around the gameplay was much grindier, so getting value, basically 2-for-1 value off of your lands was super strong.
Yeah, that's very true. Plus, you can keep a 4-card hand with land bounce land, and you basically have a 5-card hand, and you're going to make your land drops.
Exactly. Like you had to mulligan a lot of hands because you would start with like double bounce land and no other lands. But the deck mulliganed very well thanks to it. And you would unmulligan super fast. Of course, there was no Mystic Sanctuary back then, so you didn't need that many basic islands, which allowed us to play this all. Also, all these bounce lands and also the Evolving Wilds, eventually Ash Barrens, this allowed us to splash for a third color, whether in the main or in the sideboard, very easily. It was like super free to do that, so there was almost no reason not to, if you had any card you were interested in splashing for.
Yeah, why don't we talk about like why you in this list were splashing Reaping the Graves, or maybe like a Pyroblast or stuff like that?
Oh yeah, so I think in general, what you were splashing for, not just taking this list, but all the different lists from that era. Main deck, you would splash for either the Black Familiar, to give yourself like 6th, 7th, 8th Familiar extra and speed up the combo that way. that's how the deck used to be played, but eventually we found out that it's not that good, that you basically don't need it. It's just that the deck, it's not like the traditional combo decks that try to go off as soon as possible. This is more like a grindy value deck that's the best at playing the long game, and the combo is just the finish, right?
Yeah. We experimented a lot with that when Mystic Sanctuary came out to try to figure out how we can make it, try to win by turn 4 all the time, but then adding more familiars just kind of dilutes the deck, and then you end up either drawing 6 familiars and 15 cards, or all your sanctuaries, and just doesn't come together.
Oh yeah, I think with Mystic Sanctuary it's just too costly to splash for a third color, but I'm glad you tested it. Anyways, the other color to splash for would be red if you wanted some lightning bolts or flame slashes in the main deck, which were really good against like Affinity or even Delver or such, so that was like the other way to go. And there was actually an even older version of the deck with like Prosperous Pirates. The deck would win by making infinite mana with Prosperous Pirates and then bolting the opponent to death.
Yeah, that was my first experience at timing out.
Exactly. I think the other possible considerations to splash for would be in the sideboard. So one would be Reaping the Graves, as this deck has. Eventually we found out that it's probably unnecessary. We already have Mortuary Mire for that effect, and Reaping was just an overkill, but as I said, some of the matchups back then were super grindy, so it wasn't bad. And all the other cards to splash for, honestly, were mostly there to beat Tron. So you would... One tech me and 420 Dragon came up with was playing Mesmeric Fiends to basically tear the opponent's hand apart, and you would be like flickering or snapping the fiends to take away extra cards from their hand and make them never come back, even if they kill the fiend. And that was crucial against Tron because they were so light on win conditions. So once you took away their cap size, or what is it, they couldn't win. And the other notable card to splash for would be Pyroblast, which the other deck list that I've sent has in the board. And that was also mostly for Tron, also against Delver.
What do you think about Pyroblast nowadays, now that everybody has access to up to 8? And if you're running into these Pyroblast mirrors where you're trying to Pyroblast their thing and they just try to Pyroblast your thing and you can't really interact with each other.
Oh yeah, I noticed that the metagame is a lot more counterspell heavy. But for Familiar specifically, again, I think the third color is just too costly. And you actually have access to a lot of other counterspells, and that's like one of the things I think you guys have worked out really well, playing the different kind of counterspell between not only sideboard but main board as well. Whether it is like Prohibit, Old School Counterspell, Remove Soul, Exclude, all the things like that. Between all those options, you come to realize that at that point you don't even need Pyroblast.
Yeah, I've been trying to go back and forth on how to deal with combat, but we were in a very monocolored aggro meta in the November late 2019 timeframe, and now it's kind of like getting more varied. So it's like trying to figure out if we need to use Stonehorn Dignitary or just stick with the Prismatic Strands plan. And this deck just has a lot of options. I just keep fiddling.
Definitely has.
The key thing to probably point out here was that these lists were mostly around the Haze and Gush era. So you want to have... So the decks usually played a lot of removal like Serrated Arrows and Fire Ice and such.
Oh yes, certainly.
Because now you don't really see many lists play Serrated Arrows or Fire Ice that often, so...
That's true. And we can talk about it. We can talk about these specific card choices.
That sounds great.
I think what the deck was trying to do back then, or at least what I tried it to make it do, was as I said, not to win as fast as possible with the combo, but to just lock up the game. And you're not really a control deck, because control decks, I would say, are decks that care about what the opponent is playing and want to prevent them from doing that. Whereas our deck is all about ignoring what the opponent is playing and basically doing it better. Like, you wanna make an army? Okay, I'll never let you get a combat step. You wanna burn me out? I'll make 1,000,000 life. You wanna deck me? Okay, I'll just flicker my mortuary mire so that I draw a creature back.
Yeah, that's what I've been saying too. You just it's not like controlling the opponent. It's just saying what you do doesn't matter.
Exactly. And these kind of cards definitely complement that game plan. So it's basically like being pre-sideboarded. I'm talking about the Stonehorn Dignitary, specifically against aggro decks, even some combos, not that reliable against combo decks, but at least some of them, like for Elvis, for example, it was a must. Then you have Serrated Arrows, that was more for the Delver matchup. As Zimplfy mentioned, it was the era of Gush and Daze and stuff like that, so the Delver decks were probably stronger than they are today. And it was really important to have a plan for that. My plan was Arrows, and then post-board Arrows and Aven Rift Watcher. And then the other, I would say, signature card I added to the deck, this one doesn't have it, but the other list has it, is the main deck Negate, which is like the first piece of counter magic that we started playing. It was, back then, it was specifically against Pestilence, or like Tortured Existence, or Elves playing Longbow. That was like the key cards that you really wanted to counter, because even if you locked up the game, for example, you made 1,000,000 life, or you locked their combat steps, but then the Elves player, say, would play a Longbow and shoot down all your creatures, and suddenly you can no longer combo, and you're probably the one likely to deck first at that point, right? So you had to have some sort of safety valve against that, because what you would do a lot of times was to side out the Sage Road Denizen, so you would no longer have the instant win button, but you would plan to lock out the game, and you needed something to prevent basically the worst stuff from happening. But it was really just a few cards that could do that to you.
So on the top of counter magic, you see lists now plays that like prohibit and exclude, like you said. So why did you not play any counter magic back then, or play very few?
I think it simply wasn't needed. Like, the metagame was different, and most of the cards the opponents played back then you didn't care about, except, as I mentioned, those 3: Pestilence, Tortured Existence, Longbow, and you would also care about Tron. Tron was kind of a category by itself. They typically played Capsize, and they would destroy your mana base that way, so that's something you had to prevent as well. But there are different ways to counter Capsize, like flickering your own land to fizzle the buyback and stuff like that. So I just think counterspells weren't that good. You would rather play like some extra life gain, or the Stonehorns, or something like that. Yeah.
In the current meta, like when I when I started using the list after Astro, tried to keep the walls out just so that I could have more action spells, and Prohibit was like really good at protecting the familiar, especially against something like Savage Swipe, because if they Savage Swipe you with Vines and you try to snap their creature, you're super behind. Or like Prohibit can counter a Spellstutter Sprite. But I guess they were working on something like, well, you already had Serrated Arrows to handle the sprites, and they didn't have Swipe at that time, right?
Yeah, that's right. The metagame has definitely changed. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit. because I'm also curious what you guys have to say. But maybe let me start. I want to describe briefly how the metagame looked back then, and how specifically your matchups as a Familiars player looked back then, if that's okay.
Let's do it.
So starting with the easiest matchup, like mid-range on or control decks were something you feasted up on. Things like Kuldota Boros or Boros Monarch, as it's called, or Mono Black Control. These kind of decks, you would beat 9 out of 10 times with Familiars. You just outvalued them, and they couldn't really race you. You had a better long game. That's it. The aggro decks, like Stompy and the like, they were a little bit less powerful and less interactive, I would say. Like the worst thing a Stompy player could do to you would be to Vines on your Stonehorn to prevent the trigger and then attack for the win. But they didn't have much other interaction. And overall, I think the deck wasn't killing you that fast. So that's why aggro decks were also pretty good matchups. Then like the medium difficulty, where decks like Delver, both mono blue, blue-red, you definitely needed to have some plan for that, be it serrated arrows, even Rift Watchers, or lightning bolts, or electricaries. There are different plans you could go for, but you definitely needed to have something. And then there was like, I would say, decks that have like both the aggro and combo element, so stuff like Elves maybe, or Affinity, because those decks usually play like an aggro deck, but they have kind of a combo finish. They can go super fast on you and deal crazy numbers. So that was like the medium difficulty. And then the hard difficulty was straight up combo decks that were faster than you. So mostly Tarless Tribe and is it Blitz? And then Tron. Specifically the Tron with Capsize or Dinova Horrors, the one that was trying to attack your mana base. Not so much the Tron that was playing like Ulamox Crusher or Rolling Thunder. We didn't care about that much. But the Capsize version we definitely did. I wonder how it is. How is it nowadays?
Yeah, now Tribe and Blitz are mostly not present, but if you do run into them, it's going to be a problem. Sometimes with the deck, that when you have the Prismatic Strands, you can kind of punk out the Tribe or Blitz player. But now we have 2 combo decks in the field that are pretty problematic, one being the Walls deck. And that deck is just very... it's very fast, and it also just has so many redundant pieces that you can't really interact with them very well. Like you can counter one Axebane, but they have another one, or you can counter one of their ways to draw their cards, and they just have another way to draw their cards. So it feels unwinnable to me in a lot of spots.
I've had the misfortune to meet that deck 3 times already in my league. So once I have returned, and there was no chance.
I've come to the point where if I see it, I'm probably just going to concede the match, honestly. It's like facing land destruction as the old Familiars player, where, if you face mono black land destruction and you're playing bounce lands, you probably should just leave.
Do you think that the matchup is just that bad, or...
It really depends. I think, the only way to beat them is to have them stumble and you get ahead. So something like, if your deck has, let's say, 4 bounce lands and you can turbo out a Archaeomancer or 2, or like the Wall, and just start snapping all of their creatures, that would be a good way to win. Or like if you can go game 2 and prohibit a couple of their things on the play when you're on the play, and then negate their draw spells, you can win that way. But I think on the draw, you're in a really bad spot.
Oh yeah. Is there no sideboard cards to change that, or would you have to invest too many sideboard cards?
The best way to beat them would be something like an early Swirling Sandstorm, but that's going to hurt you as well. They lose pretty hard to something like Scred plus Counterspell. And I've thought about maybe just playing Screds and Familiars if you're playing like an all basics clan, but it's not super helpful. You probably just want to bring in Flame Slash at that point.
Yeah, I think the main way that I've been able to beat them is by using Essence Scatter and Counterspell, because they're just early interaction that can get rid of practically anything. So that's the main way that I can usually beat them.
It would be optimal to be playing some plan that's playing walls and then a couple of true counterspells, because then you can lock people out. And I've been toying around a lot with, taking like your old list with the 22 lands and the 6 bounce lands and just going down to 3 or 4 bounce lands and up to 4 snaps again to try to speed past people that way, which has been effective in some cases. But that's a really bad matchup. And then I would say like Tron is not a super bad matchup at this point. It kind of depends on how many bounce lands you're playing. But with a lot of counterspells in the main, and you're kind of you basically have 3 counterspells a lot of the times, and they have 3 counterspells. So you can work a spot to win game 1 in a lot of cases. And then with the list where I'm playing 3 Strands and 4 Faithfuls, you have up to 7 cards to remove that don't really affect them. So you can bring in 7 additional counterspells, which really helps you beat them in that spot. Because, I learned from you before that you kind of want to out-control them. And it's much easier to do when you have up to 10 counterspells.
Oh, yeah. And what I found is that even if you don't beat them, if they eventually out-control you, they are struggling with time. Like, during my short history of returning to the deck, I already managed to time out 2 different Tron players.
Yeah, it really depends on the players. Like, we have a couple of people in the leagues and the Pauper meta, I guess, that are very very well versed at Tron and very well versed at playing Pauper, and they go really fast. I played against Bllodpet, and he probably only used 2 minutes the entire match. As far as the rest of the field goes, Affinity was a terrible matchup, mostly because my original deck in late last year was not using the walls, so I couldn't really procure Stonehorns. And I felt that without the walls, you don't even want to put them in your list, although I have had some success with that. So I was splashing red for Gorilla Shaman to try to win that way. But they can be fast enough to kill you no matter what, which is a problem. And then Stompy can be problematic without Strands because your Stonehorns are somewhat liable to be killed by a swipe or interrupted by a Vines. So there's a lot of things to think about at this point. And we even have like the resurgence of slivers with the red, white, green slivers that Zimplfy and Fruciel put together last year. Things have gotten pretty crazy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I think Stompy has went from a very good matchup to still a fine matchup, but a little bit worse since they now have actual interaction, which is pretty bad. And they can just kill you on turn 4 now.
And sometimes they'll be playing a longbow as well, so there's a lot of things to deal with.
Yeah. I think Tron were now pretty much favored instead of it being a terrible matchup, mostly for the fact that, we have more counters, and we're not playing as many bounce lands, and Sanctuary is one hell of a card against them, since you could just loop counter spells or loop whatever you need.
And late last year, I had been having a lot of success against blue-red, the Delver Fey decks, and even mono-blue sometimes, and blue-black for sure, having a lot of snaps. But now they're starting to play Accumulated Knowledge, and I'm kind of scared about this new version of Accumulated Knowledge, that's going to be in a lot of spots, so they're going to be able to hold up counterspells on your turn and draw a ton of cards, especially combined with Mystic Sanctuary. It's very difficult to move through.
Yeah, Deprive Lock has made those matchups a little bit worse lately.
There's a lot of things to think about when building the deck at this point.
But I think, and I may not be super accurate with this because I only played like 3 leagues and 1 real-life tournament since I've returned recently to Familiars. But from what I've seen so far, it seems like for Familiars, the bad matchups have gotten less bad and the good matchups have gotten less good. Much more even playing field versus the different decks than it used to be. At least that's my impression.
Yeah, that's a good way to phrase it.
And the decks that are really bad now are mostly not played.
I think our only terrible matchup right now is probably just Blitz and Affinity. Blitz doesn't see that much play anymore since, Blue Monday happened, but it does show up every now and then by Morris. He does love that deck.
Well, today I got creamed by Infect, and yesterday I got creamed by Walls, so...
Yeah, those are also bad matchups, but Affinity is the only tier deck that we have a hard problem with. But, we can negate that by playing a Red Splash and playing Gorilla Shaman.
And in my recent experience, as long as you can survive to loop some Stonehorns and you have a lot of Dispels, then you're in a good spot for Affinity.
Yeah. I think they just attack on so many angles that it's kind of hard to win.
Bllodpet, have you tried any of the more out there familiars lists, like the Rainbow Familiars, or maybe going up to 7 familiars with the... Did you play in the Astro time frame at all?
I used to, not recently, but I used to play different versions, but I never gotten too fancy to Splash 4. I don't know. A lot of people like to add green with Explores or maybe Utopia Sprawl and things like that. I haven't gotten that cute with familiars. I've always been rather conservative, to be honest.
I think that's how I've been running as well. Just try to be consistent. Keep the floor high and the ceiling kind of low, I guess.
Yeah, I think Raptor is the only one that's been completely grinding out Rainbow Familiars lately.
I think I have faced him and he beat me pretty good. I think I got all my creatures scattershotted. That was surprising.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's definitely looking cool. I may test it at some point, but I doubt that it's overall better than just the more consistent version you guys play. But it could be super fun.
Well, essentially, you can one-shot your opponent faster, but it's less consistent at doing so. But when it wins, it wins on so many axes that you just have a good time.
Oh yeah, and that's worth it, right?
Yeah, sometimes you need that. And plus you get to play all your Storm cards.
But let me maybe share a fun little story from when I returned back to Familiars recently. Because I've actually played your list, Kalikais, and it was by complete mistake. So I just wanted to join a league, and what I wanted to do was to play the last list I played with. So it was straight up blue-white from back then with ephemerates and walls and stuff. But by mistake, I submitted Kalikais' list that has the apes in the sideboard and doesn't have any walls. It's all Mystic Sanctuary. So I found myself in literally an unfamiliar territory because I actually haven't played with Mystic Sanctuary yet, or maybe a game or two way back. But even though I know the different combos in theory, it's a lot more difficult to find them and play to them during the game. And actually, the very first game I bumped into my friend from real life that I know from the tournaments we play, and it was a super fun game. He was on blue-white spells, basically a tribe shell but without the tribe. So a lot of creatures that care about spells being played, a lot of cantrips, stuff like that. And first game I got stomped. The second game, I of course, as is my habit, I sided out the win condition without properly looking at the list. So I had no Sage Row anymore. And game 2, before I stabilized, the opponent was already at 60 life because of those prowess guys that gain line flink. And at that point, I'm like, how am I gonna win? Because opponent is at 60, all my Muldrifters are dead. Part of my graveyard has been destroyed by a relic, and I'm under Deprive lock. And at that point, I'm like, okay, so how does this combo even work, right? Where's my walls? Come on, give me my deck. You start panicking, but eventually I managed to salvage it somehow, and I ended up winning with Sanctuary and Deep Analysis without any infinite combos, basically just grinding the game out and then milling the opponent in the last couple turns. That was like the best returned experience I could hope for, and it really showed me how fun familiars still are.
Yeah, we were trying to discuss whether or not we can just remove Sage Row from the list, and then I timed how long it takes to make enough mana to compulsive mill your opponent, and I decided it was not worth it. If something like 6 minutes at hyperspeed to get enough mana to start milling them.
Mm-hmm. And we used to be milling people with compulsive with the Pirates version, right? Way back. But we eventually swapped out compulsive for Deep Analysis because it's just a better card, and especially in matchups where opponents counter your card draw. And at a certain point, you might just flashback all the analyses and suddenly you have nothing to deck the opponent with, right?
Yeah, I've had that happen to me before. Such a feels bad when you just get rid of all your deep analysis and you just can't win.
So, do you think that you're going to be starting to move forward on like the ephemerate list with the walls, or just like a flicker list with walls and sanctuary, or just a no wall sanctuary list? Like, what's your choice moving forward? Are you still testing them all?
In all honesty, I have no idea what will end up being right. Like, I've been playing with a list very similar to yours, with like both walls and sanctuary and a bunch of bounce lands and snap and all that. But it seems like those cards are kind of antithetical. It's you play bounce land, but you want to have a lot of islands for sanctuary. The wall at times feels like slow and clunky, and you almost don't want to have it. But at certain times, you only have the sanctuary, but you realize you really need Muldrifter, and you can just sometimes get all the wrong pieces. So I think what I'm gonna do going forward is actually test the sanctuary only version, and also go back and test like one of my old lists, maybe update it a little bit, but no sanctuaries, or maybe like one sanctuary. I think that's what I'm gonna test.
Yeah, we when I first started in November making placements, I was using Disdainful Stroke, as you guys had pushed forward in the last year against Tron. And then some people talked about, well, if I'm only countering Dinroba Horror, Muldrifter, and Wall, then I should just make it Essence Scatter. So then that was kind of an update there, because they weren't playing like land destruction spells that cost 4 anymore, really. And
Yeah,
there wasn't
it
a lot
makes
of
sense.
rolling thunder
There
in the
were
field.
like, back in my day, there were like you were countering Capsize or expensive land destruction, stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was like a change there. And then I really enjoy the list without walls, but you get to this spot where all these people in the Pauper Leagues just try to time you out. And it's really frustrating. So it's like very difficult to, put that together in your head. You're like, okay, well, I obviously win here. And then they just, enjoy yourself.
Yeah, that's something you have to get used to as a Familiars player, right?
Yeah, people salt on you. This morning I was at 20 minutes against a Stompy player, and I had to loop with Seagate Oracle in order to win the game, but I had 41 cards in my deck. So I had to loop 20 times until I found the Muldrifter, and then 39 more times to get back to the Muldrifter to draw my deck to snap all their guys. And then I was at like 6 minutes for game 3.
Oh yeah. Certain point you feel like you're playing a first person shooter, right? You're trying to click the combo as fast as possible.
Yeah, it's just spamming.
Just gotta be fast.
I think you were talking about that the walls seem slow, and I did see that as well. And Zimplfy was a big proponent of using Archaeomancer. And You do lose the only thing you lose the wall snap infinite combo, which is a problem, but not super important. But you get your recursion spell out a lot faster. And the nice thing about having Sanctuary and Archaeomancer is that you can just throw out the Archaeomancer there, and you don't really care if they kill it. But the opponent thinks that you care, so that's a good way to kind of bait them and get some value at a little bit of a faster rate. Plus, Archaeomancer is not a May ability, so you're even faster comboing.
Right, matters on Magic Online. Also, how are you on like Ephemerate? Because if you play Ephemerate, you probably want to play some amount of walls or Archaeomancers, right?
Yeah, I go back and forth because Ephemerate lists are quite slow, so you're going to lose to aggro a lot more, in my opinion. Unless you're playing something like 4 snaps. And then if you play your 4 snap list, I feel like you lose to control more, so I can't really find a good middle ground. I really like the 4 snap list, but I was playing 3 snap and 1 echoing truth as like a catch-all, which is something that I learned from playing Twiddlestorm in Modern. Just, okay, at any point, if something terrible happens, I have an out.
Yeah, I mean, and throughout the history of the deck, we've always searched for this kind of Swift's army knife, kind of catch-all answers, right? And Echoing Truth is definitely a good choice.
Yeah, I've always been a fan of Ephemerate, mostly for the fact that it can just do everything. You know, you can draw 6 cards with Mulldrifter, or you can lock out your opponent with Stonehorn, or just do a bunch of other cool stuff.
Yeah. It just makes me so sad when I draw an Ephemerate and nothing else to do, or I draw Ephemerate Snap and I have no creatures, or I draw, that's why I really like the list without the walls, because your wall is a synergy piece. So if you just remove all the things that are synergizing and you have an uncounterable land to handle these things, it's a lot faster and a lot more consistent, but not as explosive.
Yeah, the main problem with the Ephemerate list is that you have to play at least 4 Seagate, 4 Mulldrifter, and some amount of Archaeomancer. Like, those are pretty stock. You can't really change those, because you need as many targets as possible for Ephemerate. Like, I've even played Cloud Conceer just for more targets, so you just don't want to be stuck with dead cards in your hand all the time.
Yeah. I think the other trend worth talking about is really the need of counter magic, because I wanted to play some of my old decks, but I kind of realized that you cannot go without counter magic realistically today, right? Because opponents just attack you on too many axes that you kind of have to care about what they're doing, at least some of the decks.
Yeah, even the aggro decks.
Yeah, even the aggro decks and even like the control decks have very good card advantage options now. Yeah, like Tragic Lesson or like Tron drawing cards with their mana rock and all these sort of things.
Yeah, you kind of need counter magic now because, like you said, aggro has like Savage Swipe and such, and control now plays 6 counter spells. You can't really just not play any counters.
So it feels to me that at this point we have like 2 trees to go on, and one would be a bounce land list with 4 snaps so that you can just start doing your Evoke Snap Mulldrifter shenanigans and draw like 600 cards in a turn, or a list without walls and more consistent with 4 Deep Analysis, 4 Seagate Oracle, that kind of thing, so you just constantly are valuing your opponent while having some disruption. It's hard to say which is going to be better moving forward with these new thriving lands. Have you seen these lands?
I actually haven't. What's that?
So there's a set called Jumpstart that is a paper product where they have some number of decks or something, and you like shuffle the decks together and just start playing each other. So it's kind of like a precon. But these decks are legal in all Eternal formats, and the commons, they have this land called Thriving X. X being whatever the name
like
is.
Like Thriving Isle and stuff like that.
Yeah, so it comes into play tapped, and it taps the Isle one, taps for blue, and it also taps for whatever color you choose. But once you choose it, it's set. So you have like a tap land that can be whatever you want. It's not set in stone. So the thing that people are thinking about is, for example, in Tron, game 1, let's say they want a blue-green land, and then game 2 against a blue player, they want a blue-red land. So it's really going to push things over the top. I'm thinking that maybe we can start using those in the no-wall lists to more easily splash something like a Pyroblast or a Gorilla Shaman. Or maybe just use it in the wall lists for the same kind of effect. It's hard to say what kind of anti-combat you want the most. But I think, if you can get to the point where Stonehorns are good, they're obviously the best. But if your deck is slow, then maybe you can't even live to that point.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. I'm curious to see how that ends up working. Even though those lands, they won't count towards basic land count, right? So you can't really make it work with Sanctuary, or can you?
Yeah, they don't work with Sanctuary, which is probably the main downside.
You'd essentially want to, I was thinking, play something like a lot of compulsive researches and play those lands and play one of whatever basic you need. So that you have 1 plains and 4 to 6 of the thriving lands, and you can either fetch your plains or just compulsive and ditch those to get your Sanctuary going. Because we generally can't win before turn 5 anyway, if we're going to be playing plains and Sanctuary. So it seems like it might not slow it down too much. Not sure.
I think in Blue-Eyed Ephemery, for example, I play 4 Tranquil Cove, but now I can replace those with the thriving lands, so I could just get a free splash instead.
Oh yeah, definitely. I've tried Tranquil Cove as well, but didn't seem too strong to me, and you almost never flicker it for the life.
I don't play Sanctuary in my list, my Blue-Eyed Ephemery list, but when it comes to regular flicker lists, might be a problem to play. Because you want at least 4 of them, and you want to turn on Sanctuary at the same time, so it might be a challenge.
We'd have to kind of start getting rid of some of the fetch lands, I think. But then you're in a problem where you don't really know. I don't really know how to build the mana base so that I don't have too many lands. That's kind of difficult.
I think I'm on the idea where you just don't want to play your splash basics. So if you're playing Pyroblast, you don't want any mountains. You just go 6 of the thriving lands and hope and pray pretty much that you draw one. Yeah, it's not that terrible.
The mana base is definitely tricky, and if you compare your list to my old list and that I linked, I think the mana base is one of the key differences, right, between the bounce lands, sanctuaries, all this kind of stuff. And yeah, even after all that time, all those leagues playing, I can't really say that I figured out the correct mana base.
Yeah, I think everything in Familiars is just personal preference, really. Of course there are key cards, but, a lot of the decisions are pretty much your choice. How many Ephemeries you want to play, how many card draw spells you want to play, that kind of stuff. What counters. I think it's all pretty much personal preference. You can't really have, a best list.
Yeah. One of the big things that was a topic of discussion was how many cantrips to play. And I noticed in one of your lists, the Esper list, you're playing 6 with 2 Brainstorm. And then in the Jeskai list, you were playing 4 with 2 no Brainstorm, and just the 4 Preordained with 22 lands. Do you feel like that's fast enough? Just the 22 lands and 4 cantrips?
Probably not today. But yeah, it really depends. And the cantrips, you have to realize the cantrips are sort of part of the mana base, right? So what I felt, for example, when I picked up your list, I felt like I had to use my cantrips to find the lands, right? So I couldn't really afford to keep anything else, at least in the early turns of the game. Whereas in my lists, in my later lists, the mana base is a lot more robust, so you get to use your cantrips to find action more often than not. So yeah, it really depends, and it's playstyle dependent as well, as you said.
Yeah. Like, I started out with a 20 land mana base with 7 cantrips, but then I was just cantripping for lands every time. Or, keeping a 1 land, 2 cantrip hand, and just the first 2 or 3 turns you're just trying to find lands. And then I went up to 22 lands, back to 21, and I've kind of settled on 6 cantrips at this point. I think it's possible to do 22 lands and 4 to 5 cantrips, but then one of the most powerful things that we can do against a deck like Burn or Aggro is to play a turn 2 Faithful and immediately cantrip and start gaining life. And with very few cantrips, you're just throwing your Faithful out there to be killed, and that's been the problem.
Yeah, Callie knows me and knows that I hate cantrips, so I only play 4 Preordain on my list. But like you said, against Burn, Faithful into cantrip is such a good play against them that it kind of makes me want to play 6 cantrips again, but I think I'm just going to stick to 4 Preordain for a bit. I've never been a fan of going over to, 6 or more.
So my other question is, now that there's a Saturday challenge, and it's much better for your time zone, because it's at 5 a.m. where I am, and that would be 11 a.m., I believe, where you are. Do you think you're going to start playing those again once you have some leagues under your belt?
That's a tricky question. Maybe, yeah, maybe. I mean, when I returned, I was definitely pleased to see how good the state of the metagame is, as well as how well familiars are positioned. I haven't done that well myself in the games I've played, but hopefully I can work on that, and yeah, I will probably join some of these. Can't promise anything.
What do you think that you've been having trouble with in the leagues? Other than the Walls deck.
Yeah, all kinds of stuff. A little bit trouble with Tron. A little bit even with the aggressive decks, just being way too fast and stomping me over. I'm not sure. I haven't played enough decks or enough games to get really a great idea. But I think overall, our deck just needs to get a little bit faster, or at least be able to answer some of those early threats the opponent can provide.
Yeah, I think that I've tried to make it faster through a lot of different means, with prophetic prisms to make you have a turn 4 potentially, or extra familiars. And I think that, like you said before, we're just trying to get to the late game, and I think that we should really try to focus on that. So my plan, I think, moving forward is going to be going back to a no-wall list with my 4 Faithfuls and then 3 anti-aggro and 3 counterspells to be kind of robust and kind of averaging out to be good against all the decks. Still haven't decided how I'm going to handle multicolored aggro, but we'll get there when we get there.
Certainly.
This kind of transitions into one of my last questions is, since you took a year or so long break, what was it like coming back to the metagame and playing completely new shell familiars and seeing the metagame completely change?
Oh yeah, as I said, it was scary experience picking the list I didn't know so well. You can definitely get really comfy in your old list, and for me that's something I definitely know that's my weak side, just getting comfortable with my list without innovating too much. But you always have to innovate in order to keep up with what's going on. But as for the other decks that I've faced against, I mean, it looks really good. All the games have been fun, even though I won some, I lost some, but most of the games I've played were really cool games, and I just think the metagame now is very balanced. The playing field is very even, at least for us, and for most decks that we face. So yeah, it definitely sounds like fun, but I will need to play more in order to find out how to approach all these different matchups.
Yeah, it's one of those things where in order to learn the metagame, you have to put so many hours in because each game takes an hour.
Oh yeah. And I believe you guys, I haven't watched it yet, but you put up like a sideboard guide on one of your previous episodes, right?
Yeah, it's based on. I forget which deck it was based on, but we have a bunch of sideboard guides out there and kind of discussing like what the general plans are with the different decks.
But yeah, I definitely have to watch that because that was like, if I go back, revisit my old content that I put on my YouTube, I think like the best video probably I made was also like a sideboard gate and matchup analysis, which is something you really need like extensive knowledge, not just of the deck, but also of the whole metagame and have a lot of games grinded. So that's not something you can just cheese out. So I'm definitely looking forward to watching what you guys have to say about that.
I also put out a sideboard guide on Reddit and in the Discord with linked specifically to the ephemerate list that I had been running. Set that up for Caleb Shearer. He's been trying to pick up this deck in Pauper. And in our Discord, I have a sideboard guide channel in which I have at the top listed a sideboard guide for my note walls list, which is a lot of things for people to be looking at if anyone's interested.
Yeah, there's so many sideboard guides out there for all the versions of Familiars, so.
Yeah, but it's not just the sideboard guide, right? It's not just the cards you put in, it's also the cards you put out and the overall how you approach the different matchup, what your win condition is, what to be wary of. That's what matters.
Yeah, the matchup analysis is something that's very important because as soon as you determine what you're against, you can figure out how to pick cards from your cantrips or how to sequence in order to have the best chance of winning, for sure. I just want to say thanks for coming on, Bllodpet, and we all appreciate all the content that you put out before and hope that you just continue to enjoy or at least check in every now and then.
Oh yeah, it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Is there any way you'll make content anymore?
No promises again. I think like in order to make content, you need to be good at it, at the game. And I definitely have some catching up to do, but maybe, yeah.
Is there any place that we can find your content or anything like that?
Yeah, it's YouTube. My channel is called Bllodpet, spelled same as the card, so blood/pet.
So yeah, thank you so much for coming on, Bllodpet. It was a pleasure talking to you, and hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Unfamiliar Territory. Next week we should be having another one of the classic Familiars players come on and talk about their experiences with the deck as well. Thank you all for watching. We will see you all next episode.
Thank you so much.
Peace.
See ya.